Chapter 5. ASTORYFROMPENANG. This story is from Penang, and it happened between 2005 and 2006. I sat in the home of Thomas and Helen for more than 3 hours interviewing them on their experiences. It was the beginning of the year 2005, when Thomas and Helen hired a maid from Sabah. She was 15 years old then. She came from a broken home. Her father had died when she was 1 year old. Her mother was his second wife. Her widowed mother remarried another man, and left her daughter to the grandmother's care. Hence, this maid of theirs had lived in her grandmother's home for a year. At her grandmother's house, her great-grandmother was also living. Both these old grandmothers practiced witchcraft in Sabah. The maid had dropped out from school before completing her Form 2 at the time when she came to Penang to join their family. A secretive maid. The maid was secretive and very quiet most of the time. She had the habit of telling lies and stealing small items in the house. When Thomas and Helen confronted her, she admitted telling lies and stealing things in the house. She had many things hidden up her sleeve. On one occasion they found 2 pears and a raw sweet potato taken from the kitchen and hidden among her clothes in her room. On another occasion, a wedding ring that belonged to Helen's sister was missing, after the maid had put up a night in her place. Later on, she admitted taking the ring and returned it to Helen's sister. These little acts of wrongdoings were perhaps entry points for the bad spirits to enter her life. Thomas and Helen noticed that she was not obeying their instructions given to her regarding caring for their infant child. For instance, on one occasion, they told her to change the pampers in the morning, but this was not done until evening that day. On another occasion, they told her to warm up the baby food before feeding their child, but this was again not done. On another occasion, the maid had chicken pox, and she did not inform them until the symptoms appeared all over her. They had to send her away to a friend's house for a week until she was healed. They were concerned for the safety of their baby girl of 5 months. While staying with the friend for a week during her illness, she had also stolen some women's clothing belonging to the friend. Later on, she confessed to taking the clothes and then returned them to the owner. There were frequent instances where she was disobedient and irresponsible in her duties assigned to her. All these were perhaps little doors of entry points to invade her life in the end, discovering the tip of an iceberg. Then, one day it occurred to Helen that their maid was not behaving in a normal way because someone else was controlling her mind from a distance. Helen observed that she seemed to be listening to a voice that was telling her what to do. Helen asked her point blank, "You are not listening to me, but you seem to be listening to someone else talking to you. Is this correct?" She admitted some supernatural force in her was telling her what to do, and it was at this stage Helen discovered something. Helen was not at odds with her maid alone. She was fighting with supernatural forces manifested through the maid. It was like discovering the tip of an iceberg. Now, knowing how to help her maid, she and her husband called their pastors, Lawrence Randig and Francis Amir, to their house for a prayer session for her. This invitation of their pastors to pray for her opened up opportunities for an open confrontation with the spirits. There were 4 episodes of exorcism, written below in chronological order, rebellious and secretive in attitude. These episodes always happened on weekends when Thomas was away in Kuala Lumpur on business trips. It was sometime near the end of March 2006. Helen's baby was about 10 months old then. The weather was hot at that time. As usual, the maid was not obeying orders. Helen told her to give water to the baby with a bottle, but instead she was giving it using a cup. She seemed to be watching TV all the time and neglected her work. When Helen asked her why she was always watching the TV, She said she was addicted to it since she was young, and that in Sabah she had watched TV for 10 hours a day. She pleaded that she be given a chance to improve herself. She said she wanted some guidance and wished to be baptized. Helen arranged with someone to have Bible studies with her, but she studied with the person only on one occasion. Each time she was supposed to have Bible lessons, she locked herself in her room and refused to come out. Wild music can invite spirits. After the first stage of exorcism was over, the following week, the maid was listening to rock music played very loudly. Then, all of a sudden, she said, "Today they are coming." Helen asked her who was coming. She kept quiet. That night she slept in the living room instead of in her bedroom. She had referred to the spirits that they were coming to attack her again. Mind-controlling spirits. On April 22, 2006, she said that the spirits had forbidden her to go to church and had told her go shopping instead. Helen asked her, "Why are you behaving in this manner?" She replied, "It is not me. It is the spirit in me telling me what to do." She said that the spirit also told her to discontinue the Bible studies. If she disobeys, her body would feel very hot. If she went to church, her feet would burn as if there were hot coals under her feet. On that Saturday morning, the maid's mother from Sabah telephoned her. Apparently the mother, who practiced witchcraft and living about 1,500 miles away, seemed to know what was happening to her daughter in Penang. The message from her mother was that she must not go to church. During the many months while the maid had been in the home of Thomas and Helen, the mother in Sabah had never telephoned her even once. It was rather strange that her mother should call her at that particular time and warn her specifically not to attend church. That night, another prayer session was done for her in the house. It was about 8:00 when the prayer session started. Thomas and Helen prayed with some nurses from the hospital. They sang songs and took turns to pray. At about 9:30, the church pastors arrived at their house. They continued to sing, read the scriptures, and pray until 11:30. During prayer, the maid's eyes would roll within their sockets. Her body would act shocked, and she would become hysterical. During prayer, she said that she must not break her promise she had made with her grandmother. They asked her, "Your grandmother is already dead. What promise did you make with your grandmother?" It became apparent to them that the grandmother who had been practicing witchcraft in Sabah when she was alive had enslaved the mind of her granddaughter, surrendering all articles of witchcraft. Again they asked her to surrender all articles of witchcraft. In her purse was found a small notebook in which were some Jawi writings. There was also a brown towel she often used to cover her head. These articles were believed to be charmed. Several people went into her bedroom, and there saw a black cloth tied to the window. It was rather strange why such a cloth be tied there for no reason. They knew at once it was another object of charm. They took it from the window and together with the other articles of charm collected from her, and burned them all. When this was done, the power of charm over her was broken. Prayer was going on in sessions until 3:30 on Sunday morning, April 23, 2006. Helen also phoned up her mother in Mengatal, Sabah, and informed her of what was going on in their house in Penang and requested special prayers. Helen's mother visited the local pastor there, George Abbey, and requested special prayers for them in Penang. The maid was partially delivered by that night of prayer. On that Sunday night she slept well. She chose to sleep in the living room instead of her bedroom. On the 25th of April, 2006, she reported to Helen that she saw some spirits standing a little distance from her in the living room. But she also said that those creatures with green eyes that used to crawl all over her body had disappeared. Struggle during baptism. On May 6, 2006, she was scheduled to be baptized in water. On Friday, May 5, she attended the Christian Youth Fellowship. When she returned home that night about 9:30, she reported to be feeling very unbalanced and weak. The spirits were trying to hinder her baptism. On May 6, during the rite of vow-taking and baptism, she was hysterical again. It took 3 pastors to calm her down and bring her into the baptistry. The spirits return. On May 27, 2006, a graduation ceremony was conducted for the nurses at the hospital. By this time, the maid was about 90% delivered from the spirits, but there was still a small remnant of them left in her. On that day, a tour was organized by the graduating class of nurses. In the tour, one of the places the parents and nurses visited was the Kek-Lok-Si Temple. The maid joined the tour group to go into the temple. At the temple, there was a gong that was hit loudly and repeatedly during their visit. At that moment, the maid was repossessed again. She later said that the sound of the gongs troubled her, and the spirits suppressed her mind, and she became hysterical. This time, 5 pastors calmed her down and prayed for her. They were Lajanim, Gerard, Randig, Francis, and Eugene from Sabah. Eugene and Lajanim were visiting Penang and had come to witness the graduation exercise of the nurses. The story ends here, at the time of writing. The future is yet to be seen. Lessons learned. Thomas and Helen learned much during those weeks of torment from the bad spirits. They learned these lessons first. They learned the reality of the existence of bad spirits in our world. Next, possessing objects of charm in the house invites the bad spirits into the house. They also learned that by going to places inhabited by bad spirits, one can invite them into their homes. Finally, the most valuable lesson they learned from that experience was that in exorcism, we should not have any kind of dialogue with bad spirits. Instead, we should commit ourselves to God and address our prayers to Him alone for help. We should focus our thoughts on God's promises when doing exorcism rather than on the spirits themselves.